We couldn't possibly trust preachers to be a specialist in all of these fields. So I would hope that you would trust yourself and review the evidence objectively. Thanks.
This is the question segment, so I'm going to go ahead and ask my first question. Then David Smalley will come up and give his answer. Here's my question. At the end of this world's history, when the sun ceases to give energy to the earth, and the earth is unable to support life, will there be an ongoing eternal meaning or purpose to your existence which you presently experience?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. At the end of this world's history, when the sun ceases to give energy to the earth and the earth is unable to support life, will there be an ongoing eternal meaning or purpose to your existence which you presently experience?
No.
Thank you. At what point in the supposed evolutionary process of changes on this earth did dead and lifeless matter become alive, and how did this occur?
That's a very good question, and I do not know the exact moment in time that it happened, and no one does. The scientist, the evolutionist, the atheist have no problem saying we don't know, because we don't know yet. We're moving closer and closer to that every day. But the atheist, the evolutionist, the scientist doesn't give up and say, well, since we don't know right now, let's assume it was a god. Because that's what the Greeks did with Demeter. That's what the Greeks did with Thor. And now those are just proved. So we don't know that yet. There are multiple experiments happening as I'm speaking right now that are testing that. There are suggestions as far as, well, here's a lot of life, and here's basic life, and bubbling springs under the ocean that are very hot, that have the environment capable of supporting life, and we see bacteria growing and developing, and crabs and things that find species we've never found before. And they're thinking that may be where it is, but we don't know yet. It doesn't mean we should give up and say it must have been a god.
I do know. Number 3, if there is no eternal soul in man, what is the inherent moral difference between stomping a roach and stomping a 2-year-old child? Why is it morally wrong to do one and not the other?
Roaches are icky. Would you? No, that's not good enough. That's a great question too. And just so you know, these were surprise questions. We did not share these with each other. I can only answer that question for me personally. I'm a secular humanist. I do things that would cause the least amount of harm to my fellow man. My wife and I are working on starting a nonprofit organization as a secular life rehabilitation center to help people get back on their feet, either from homeless or whatever their situation may be. And there is no all-powerful inspiration for that. There's no prayer inspiration for that. And I can only say that I would say that we could not stomp a 2-year-old child because of our compassion. Because of that compassion that's in us for survival of our own species. You see, when a baby is born, that child cannot feed itself. So if we didn't have that compassion, as monkeys also do, by the way, and multiple other animal species do for their own kind, if we didn't have that compassion, we would feel no need to feed that thing that's crying on the floor. We may just stop it. But we have not evolved that way. Because we have had that compassion within us, we've made it this far in life. And the best answer I could give is that we're not cockroaches.
Number 4, since you don't believe in the existence of a creator, Is it logical to believe that the material universe has always existed and there was no one to begin the process of life? Or that the material universe sprang from nothing?
Again, this is another question that is still being answered, but the answer now is that everything began from the singularity. And the singularity is basically a moment in time in which matter began expanding. I know that only begs more questions. And that is the primary question for why we're even here today. Because if I could answer that, there would be no doubt in anyone's mind. We would know the answer. Again, we can't just give up and say that a God did it and then claim to know that God and that He's involved in our daily lives and cares if our son wins the baseball game. We can't pretend to have that much of intimate knowledge because there must have been something. I don't know, and I'm okay with saying I don't know. But the answer now is that we can see that the planets are expanding from each other now. Everything is expanding very rapidly, so we can only assume from that, as investigators that arrive on the crime scene afterwards, that at one time it was compacted and then expanded. What caused that expansion? I don't know. But again, that doesn't mean that the Christian religion is right, or we should give up and say that it must have been a God, since we don't have that evidence today. We're going to continue looking. We're not going to continue worshiping.
I do know God created all things. Last question is, without a God inspiring the Bible writers to write what they did, how was it possible for them to know that the earth was round, as we read in Isaiah 40:22, that there are currents in the ocean, as we read in Psalm 8:8, that there are springs at the bottom of the ocean, as we read in Job 38:16, and other scientific facts that man would not discover on his own for thousands of years?
Why did they warn us about Hitler? Why did they tell us about penicillin? Why do they tell us about plasma TVs? Why do they warn us about cancer? Why isn't there cures for HIV? There are parts of the Bible that suggest that it is a flat earth book. Multiple geologists will confirm that. At one point, and I don't remember the scripture now, but it was along the lines of, I believe it was in Genesis, on the flood, where it talks about that the earth was filled with water, and then a wind came along and blew the water off of the earth, or the waters assuaged, or something along those lines. That can only happen on a flat surface. If it was round and spherical and they knew that, and a wind came and it was nothing but water, that would just be waves. So again, the Bible contradicts itself. There may be some answers in there that appear to be foreknowledge of the Bible, but in fact, it's pretty clear that they did not know these things. Now I have 5 questions for Michael. Don't peek. I don't know where you get your morals from, so. Matthew 19:6 says, "What God has put together, let no man separate." If men of God ordain Christian marriages and God Himself puts them together, why do Christians get divorced at the same statistical rate as everyone else?